The following program is rated TVMA-LSV. It contains smoking, drinking, strong language, sexual innuendos, and virtual violence. It is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, let's get ready to fuck some shit up.
All right, virtual wrestling fans, Sam Schluter, the straight shooter here with a very fine guest for you. Our first ever episode of The Shoot with Sam Schluter is a big guest here, none other than James Ellsworth, former WWE wrestler, and we're going to get right into it right now with Mr. James Ellsworth. Thank you for joining us, James. How are you doing today, my friend?
At my home, going to go wrestle in a couple hours. I'm just doing good, man. I'm happy to be still kicking.
Well, it's good to finally meet you. We just met about 5 minutes ago. I like to keep things organic, so let's get right into it. I pulled up a little bit of your history. Let's see if Wikipedia is any good for us, but I like going straight to the source, and then you correct me if anything is wrong. Baltimore, Maryland, born in 1984. How is that? I was born in 77, so you're not too much off from me. So how was it for you growing up in
Oh
Baltimore,
man,
Maryland?
Baltimore's a tough town, and it makes you mentally and physically tough. Growing up in Baltimore, um, I still live here, and I've been all over the world. Very blessed to have been all over the world. But Baltimore's home. It's where I was born and raised. It's where I'm at still to this day. I love it. I love the sports teams here, and it's just home, man. It's home.
Now, how were you as a kid? Were you mild mannered? Were you rambunctious? Were you out there in the fields playing a lot? How were you as a kid?
Uh, Man, just all the above. I've always been full of energy, and I always wanted to just be entertaining and be like the center of attention. My youngest daughter, she's the same way, and yeah, I was very ambitious and just full of life, as I still am when I was a kid. And yeah, man, I just always very positive. Even when I'm in negative situations, I stay positive, and I've always been that way since I can remember.
And who were your favorite wrestlers in 1984? Man, that was the golden age was just booming right now. For me, big Hulkamania fan. I was born and raised in Chicago, and I knew about Mr. T before I knew about Hulk Hogan. So Mr. T and Hulk Hogan, that was just a winning combination for me. Who is it for you?
Oh man, I remember the late '80s. Yeah, like you said, I was born '84. My memory starts around maybe late '87, early '88. Obviously, '89, and I remember seeing the Ultimate Warrior, and I thought this guy was so cool. Like as a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, you see the Ultimate Warrior, you're like, wow, look at this dude. He's running to the ring and he's shaking the ropes. He's wearing face paint and he's all jacked up. And so him, and then on the other channel, Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express, like he just looked like he could be your uncle. You know what I mean? Like he just
Right.
looked like a regular dude, and he was so passionate when he was cutting his promos. And man, he as a kid, he got me in. Like him and the Ultimate Warrior, the first two wrestlers I remember seeing in that early stage of the late '80s.
Now, were you like more WCW, WWF? Where were you at on that one?
Oh man, so more towards the WWF. I watched WCW. I just like wrestling. I like watching wrestling, but I was, WWF is what I grew up on more than anything. So I'm very loyal. At least I try to be. And yeah, so I would watch more WWF than anything, and that was always the dream. That was always the goal. But yeah, like WCW was great. Even in like the early '90s, everybody always talks about the NWO and Goldberg and all that, and Diamond Dallas Page was all great stuff. But in the early '90s, man, watching like Stunning Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, and just like the natural Dustin Rhodes and Vader and all these guys in the early '90s WCW. I enjoyed that as well, but I was always more toward WWF for sure. As far as which show I enjoyed more.
Yeah, I had a friend. He was big WCW, so I watched it when I spent the night at his house, and then we watched WWF when we spent the night at my house. And it was always going back and forth. And like you said, um, it looked like your uncle. Those guys on WCW, they had a more realism to it that you couldn't really appreciate at a young age. And as you got older, I was 21 when NWO came around, so I was like, oh, okay, I appreciate that. I see it now. So you started off wrestling on your own. How was that? You trained under Axel Rotten.
Yeah, man, I started at a very young age, tender age of 17, fresh out of high school, literally 4 days removed from graduation. I started wrestling school in 2002, and I met Axel for the first time shortly after that. And I trained with a lot of good guys at my wrestling school, Bone Breakers here in Baltimore. But once I got on the road with Axel and started training with him, like he was just a genius about the psychology of wrestling, and I learned so much from him. And I like as I was learning, I felt I was absorbing all this information that I didn't have before about how you work a crowd and how the facial expressions matter and the selling matters, and if you're not selling, no one's buying it, and like all this cool stuff he would teach me. And everyone knows him as the ECW original hardcore chair swinging freak, the hardcore stuff. But in reality, he really had a good mind for the business, and I'm very blessed that I got to be mentored by him and trained by him.
Now, were you already smartening up to the business before you started training, or were you in for a rude awakening?
Well, I knew it was going to be hard,
Mhm.
especially in those days. It's a shame. It's a lot easier to get into wrestling now, and it shouldn't be. Like if you're just a friend of someone, they'll throw you on the shows, or if you have money, you buy into the shows and put yourself on the shows. It's very sad that stuff goes on because you really should
Right.
have to earn it. And I was like a part of the last years of having to earn it. And I remember there was like a dozen people in my class when I first joined wrestling school, and out of the dozen, three of us graduated out of that class. Like, and um, because it was hard, and it's supposed to be hard. I mean, I always, I knew from a very young age that wrestling was just entertainment. I picked up on that pretty quickly, probably around, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. I was like, I can tell this is just a show, but that's okay. I'm enjoying it.
Right.
And but it hurts. Like the ring hurts. And when I joined wrestling school, it was very tough and very mentally draining. But you like I said, growing up in Baltimore, you become you have to be tough, and you have to be very mentally strong, and I was, and that's how I was able to make it through.
Now, where did Pretty Jimmy Dream come from? Was that something you had created while you were watching WWF back in the day? And like, if I ever start wrestling, this is because everybody does it. I do it too. But if everybody, this is going to be my persona. Where did that one come from? Did somebody help you along with that, or?
Well, when I first started wrestling, I was just Jimmy Dream, and the reason why I used the name Jimmy Dream was because wrestling was my dream, and I was just trying to like make a gimmick out of that. And 5 6 years go by, and I was like, this Jimmy Dream thing isn't working. Like I had a dream catcher on my pants, and I kind of try to just dress like a Hardy Boy or whatever, like everybody did back in those days.
The
And
big Junko pants?
yeah, and I was like, man, I need a gimmick. I need something different. And like it wasn't until like 2007 I was like, man, like I'm wrestling this guy Adam Ugly all the time, who I went to high school with, who was one of the graduating guys in my class too in wrestling school. We've been best friends for years, and I was like, his name's Adam Ugly, so what if I called myself Pretty Jimmy, and I started acting like I was the prettiest wrestler in the world, and we could be Pretty Jimmy and Adam Ugly, Pretty Ugly. That could be our tag team. I was like, now that sounds cool,
That is a
and
cool
that
name.
started, yeah, and it started to evolve, and we worked very hard, and we're just smaller guys, like he's short and chunky, and I'm short and skinny. So it's like we were always entertaining. Any show we were on with that gimmick, like he'd wear a toilet seat around his neck, and I'd come out with mascara and fishnets on, and like we were doing the whole thing. And every town we went to would react to us, and I'm like, man, we're really onto something here. But not a lot of people wanted to give us opportunities at the bigger companies because we're just our stature and our size and all that. But I personally just kept fighting through all that. I knew I was like I felt like I was being really entertaining because anytime we'd be in front of an audience, that audience was reacting. I was like, I really have something here. Like I feel in my heart of hearts that I'm a very good entertainer. Not like there's a lot of entertaining guys. I felt like I was very confident that I was like a really, really advanced entertainer. And I was like, man, I just hope the right person sees this one day. And Axel used to tell me that. Axel's like, you're really good at this. And if the right person sees you one day, something may happen. And he's like, it's going to be hard for you because of your size and your look and all that. And I'm not the most athletic guy either. And, but I felt it. I always felt it, man. Honest to God. Like, I felt like I had something as an entertainer.
And for the up and coming, excuse me, for the up and coming wrestlers out there, based upon your experience, what bit of advice would you have? Because personally, for me, I'm 5'7", 135 before I take my morning shit. You know what I'm saying? So, to see somebody like you that has, you're not a big muscle bound body, but you entertain, you know how to run the ropes, you
Mm.
work good, and you make up for the lack of size, so that relates to me. So I just want to share that with you, like, seeing somebody like you, like you say, I see Ricky Morton on there, he looked like my uncle Ricky, you know what I mean? And that transcends a little bit. Has anybody ever came up to you and be like, oh, because I seen you and this and that?
Absolutely, man. I always the first thing I tell people is because I see a lot of this. I said, go get trained by someone who has made a living at wrestling, who has traveled the world, who has been a part of one of the big companies, who has done it the right way and has achieved, you know, um, superstardom in wrestling, or like I said, at least making a living off of it, and learn from them because those are the people that have done it at a high level, and that's what you want to do. You want to do this at a high level. There's people that are, they're happy with it being a hobby and wrestling on the indies and all that, but you still want to be good at it. Even if you're doing that, even if you're just wrestling the indies and it's a hobby to you, you still want to be good at it. People are still paying money to come to shows to see you wrestle or perform, and you got to be good at it. And there's a lot of places out there where people are training people that haven't done anything, and I'm like me, I was very fortunate that I found Axel. Like I said, the guys that trained me before them, all good guys. Um, he taught me how to bump, hit the ropes, take a punch, throw a punch. But it wasn't until I started getting trained by Axel Rotten, who was part of ECW and who traveled the world and made a living from wrestling. And so I really started picking up the information I needed to eventually get to where I got one day. And that's the first thing I tell people. And look, especially this day and age, man, it doesn't matter how big you are, what you look like. If you find your thing, like
Right.
I'll bring up a guy like Orange Cassidy. He's not
Right.
the biggest guy. He's in decent shape, but he doesn't. If this was 1993, he'd be on Superstars jobbing to, you know, like the Warlord.
Right.
So
Right.
like or Ludwig Borga. I just love to say the name Ludwig Borg. I always have. But anyway, but he found his niche to connect with the audience, and it got him a job on television. So anyone can do that. You got to work hard. You got to just find yourself, find who you are as an entertainer, and just be able to know the basics real well in the ring and be safe and it just takes finding that something. What is your something? And that's what I did.
What's your favorite on the road story? You've been in the independent circuit, you've been in the big leagues, back on the independent circuit. What's your favorite on the road story with that you can remember off the top of your head?
Oh man, I'm trying to think of one where I could just I can tell one here.
We're a non-PG
Uh,
show, so go ahead.
well,
Don't get
still,
nobody in
people,
trouble.
yeah, but you got to watch what you say these days. People cry over anything. Um,
Yes.
I'm trying to think of I'll give you an actual story. We were at we pulled up in the McDonald's drive-through. We were on our way back from a show, and when we pull up to the drive-through, and he winds down the window to order the food, he goes, "All right, I'm gonna start yelling at you. Yell back." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, and then she's like, "Hey, man, take your order." And he goes, and he starts yelling at me. He's like, "Yeah, hold on a second, ma'am." And he goes, "You motherfucker, you pissed me off tonight. You have to." And I'm like, and so I just went along with it. I was like, "No, fuck you." And we're going back and forth as this lady, she's waiting for us to give her, for us to give her the order, and
Right.
she hears all this on her, and then he goes, "Now, get out of the car and let's fight." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "What the hell is he doing?" So we get out of the car and we start, wrestling
In the
in the middle
drive-through.
of the drive-through. And next thing you know, people are screaming and all this and all that. And she's like, "I'm gonna call the cops. I'm gonna call the cops." And we got in the car and left. And he's laughing. I'm like, "What are you doing?" I said, "What was that?" He goes, "That was something you're gonna remember the rest of your life." And I said, "Yeah."
There
And
it
as we're
is.
driving down the road, we see the cop cars flying by us to go to the McDonald's. I'm like, I was like, well, at least they didn't describe the vehicle to them yet, because because we were probably 3 or 4 hours away from home. I'm like, God, and I remember the rest of the way home. I'm like, please just let us get home, like without the police, like pulling us over. Hey, you were the guys fighting in the drive-through at the McDonald's back in, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, or wherever it is we were.
That's a
So
great memory, man.
oh man, I love him, man. I miss him, and that's just one of many stories that I had on the road with him, and yeah, so that was a
Now,
good one.
how was it, you know, day one when you got the call from WWE?
Well, there was really not a call. Like when they come to near your town, if you're an independent wrestler, anyone, I mean anyone, even if you suck, can like send them an email and get booked as a TV extra, which is no different than when you watch like an episode of Seinfeld and they're in the coffee shop and you see people in the background drinking coffee. Those are TV extras. For wrestling, you could be when you go to TV, you could be a security guard, you could be you could play a doctor, you could play a guy just standing in the crowd,
You
or
be
you
on
could
the conga
you
line for No Way Jose.
yeah, I was in the I was a Rosebud for Adam
Yeah,
Rose, and so all this you can do. Even if like you can lie in the email. I don't condone anyone to do this. No one should do it and say you're better than you are. And um, when you get there, if you're a small guy, especially, you might get a quick little match, getting beat up because the smaller guys make their guys look so much bigger.
right.
So I've been doing that for years, just signing up to be an extra. And then when I did the Strowman thing, they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna do this gimmick with Strowman this every week where he's wrestling an enhancement talent," and I was the first one. And they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna give you guys like, a 30-second promo, basically saying your last words before this guy kills you." And I remember thinking, "Well, I'm doing this match." I was like, they're letting me talk on TV. This is really cool. I was like,
Oh
and
yeah.
in my head, I'm going, man, this is going to be my only time ever wrestling for WWE. It's hard to get those opportunities where you're in a match. I mean, you know, especially and you get to talk. So I was like, man, like this
That's
is cool.
rare.
And yeah, and like, and to me, that you don't become a superstar this way. I mean, at least you're not supposed to. And I'd see guys come like do those job matches, and they come back to DJ. You see me on WWE, and they would put on like the flyer as seen on WWE TV, blah blah blah. I'm like, really? That's kind of cheesy, guys. You're not a WWE superstar. No one knows who you are. You just got beat up on TV real quick to make their guy look good. That was your job. You got paid $200 and you're out the door. Like you're not. I hate. I used to always hate when people do that. So I remember going into that match going, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put as seen on WWE TV. I'm not going to make a big deal out of this at all. I'm going to do one match. I'm glad I get to cut a promo and I'll show this to my kids the rest of my life. Like, hey, look, your dad was on WWE once, and So anyway, I remember they gave me the script for the promo, and I was reading it. I was like, hey, can I say like this line? Any man with two hands has a fighting chance, because I know I'm punching him twice, and that I think that makes sense. And they were like, oh man, it's a great line. Yeah, say it. And I said that, and it just felt so like natural when I said it, and so good. We did the match, and my facial expressions were good. And I remember the whole day I was driving myself crazy, going, I need to do a good job. This is going to be my only WWE match ever, and I just want to look back at it, know that I did a good job for Strowman. And I've never did that good in my life. Still to this day, I don't think I could duplicate. Every little thing I did was just on point, and I haven't done it since. Like where everything was just that good. And when I get to the back, Arn Anderson, who was the agent for the match, was like, "Hey, Vince wants to talk to you." And I was like scared to death. I thought I did something wrong. Why would Vince
Wow.
McMahon why would Vince McMahon want to talk to me? Like, what could he possibly want with me? I'm 14 years into business to this point, so I'm pretty. Yeah, I feel like I was pretty smart about it, And I'm like, man, he's gonna yell at me for like walking down the ramp because you're not supposed to walk down the ramp, and I did to get to the ring when you're an extra talent. And I was like, man, so I go to the gorilla and I'm looking for him. And he's coming down the stairs, the gorilla, and man, it just still seems like a blur. And he's like, hey, come here, James. And I was like, man, he said my name. Oh God. I was like, thank you, sir. I had so much fun out there. And he goes, yeah, you did a hell of a job. He's like, matter of fact, you did a great job. He goes, I'm going to hire you. I,
Wow.
and I'm like, what? And then he walked away. And Triple H comes down. He said, hey, man, he's serious. He'll be in touch with you. And he shook my
Wow.
hand. And I'm like, there needs to be a movie of. I need to really have a movie or a book or something, like, because this is crazy, real stuff that happened. And I'm just walking back to the locker room, and like, people are high fiving me, like the WWE guys who don't really talk to the extras. Are like, man, what a good job, what a good job. And I went to catering to eat, and Strowman came up and gave me a bear hug. Man, you did awesome,
Nice.
man. They loved it. They loved it. Vince loved it. I'm like, what the? So 6 weeks later, Vince McMahon called me and he said, hey, we're ready. Ready to give you a job, pal. Ready to come to TV? I'm like, yes, sir. Like what? Like what? What? And that's how it happened, man. And like I said, as I said earlier in the interview, I always felt like, in my heart of hearts, that people thought I was full of shit, or I was crazy, or I was stupid, or I was a moron, or what.
Right.
That I had this in me, like that I was that good of an entertainer, and everybody. I think people thought I had an ego where I was just overconfident, or I was just full of myself. Like that wasn't it. Like I've never been any of that. Like I just really felt like, judging by when I would go to towns and wrestle, and seeing the reactions on these people when I would get them going, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm pretty good at this. Because I mean, the facial expressions and the selling and the talking, the promos, they all mean so much more than the actual wrestling, and
Right.
like, and it always will. It did with Ric Flair. It did with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin is the best example. He was at WCW as Stunning Steve Austin, wrestling his ass off, having awesome matches with Ricky Steamboat, and Brian Pillman, and all these guys. And he was okay. He gets to WWE. He starts talking and finds that gimmick of he's a badass. He's Stone Cold Steve Austin. He became the biggest star in the world.
Yep.
He
And that.
always had that in him. And it's funny, he knew he always had that in him. Watching interviews or listening to interviews with him, he would go to Eric Bischoff at WCW. Hey man, I think I should feud with Hulk Hogan. Eric Bischoff will look at him like, you're not a top guy. Like, you're just a wrestler. You're not an entertainer. Hulk Hogan's an entertainer. He knew he had it in him, and he became the biggest star in the business. And like I never thought like I would accomplish all that I accomplished, but I always thought like I had something in me, something to provide as far as being on television to a bit, in a bigger company. I always thought I did, and I'm glad I got to do it, man. Because like I didn't want to go on the rest of my life not accomplishing that, and I'm very blessed that I got to accomplish that.
Yeah. And that led you into the whole thing with the Carmella and the briefcase, and man, you got major heat for that. You know what I'm saying? But
Loved it.
it's all good. It's all good. Whether they like you or they hate you, at least they notice you, and that's
As
real
long as
good.
they're reacting, and they reacted to me the whole time I was in WWE. I don't speak negatively of them. I feel like I could still, provide entertainment there, but that it's not my call. It's their company, you
Right.
know, and they're letting go of people all the time, and that's just the way they do things. Whether people like it or not, it is what it is. But they provide a lot of people. Um, they have and will continue to provide a lot of people with very good paying jobs, and you get to travel the world on their dime, and you just enjoy it while it
Yeah.
lasts, man. And then when
And
it's over, don't cry about that it's over. I mean, obviously you get upset when your dream ends, but
right.
I mean, I'll never say a bad word about them, man.
Well,
I
they
thank
gave
God
you a
every day.
platform. They gave you a
Yeah,
platform to continue. That's where I was going to go into. Like, so you proclaimed yourself the world intergender champion. You took that ball and ran with it. And Andy Kaufman did it, and he was one hell of an entertainment, and he respected the wrestling business. He loved it. You know, you made that your own championship. So that's like little stepping stones into where you're gonna be. And I always believe like, yeah, you could live your dream, but even dreams are not forever. It's gonna be for a little bit, and then you're gonna have to move on. You're gonna
yeah.
have to move on. And you've done that real nicely. You're still out there on the independent circuit, first ever Santino Cobra Cup winner. How was that?
Oh, that was my first show after being released the first time from WWE. And I was surprised on that show, and just it was in Toronto, and I love Toronto. What a great city Toronto is in Canada. And when I came out as a surprise, the people went nuts. I'm like, man, this ain't over. I'm going back to WWE. I knew it right at that moment. Like I was like, they're gonna call me back. This, and they did. Just not even that long after, And Santino, what a great guy he is. Has a nice dojo up there. Uh, George, the promoter, he's a great guy. That place is a lot of fun. I hope they're still doing good business up there. Yeah, Canada's awesome, man. Especially Toronto. That was a good time for sure.
All right, got to wrestle a lot of famous names. Nick Aldis got to go up. How was it tag teaming with Gilbert and winning the tag titles there?
So Gilbert is a really good friend of mine. I've known him my whole life. He's from Baltimore as well. He actually lives in the same zip code as me, so we see each other all the time. I'll see him tomorrow at a show. One of my best friends. Yeah, but yeah, it was fun when towards the end of him doing his independence because he's retired now.
Hmm.
Him and I became tag champs, Adrenaline Championship Wrestling, and we had so much fun doing that, and we had a blast, man. We teaming up, and yeah, what a great guy he is, and I can't wait to see him tomorrow. That's my boy. That's like my buddy. That's just my dude. It's crazy because we had similar paths and we're such close friends, and he knows my family real well and everything. So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about him. He had a heart attack last year. I set up a GoFundMe for him and helped him out, and he's doing better now, and yeah, it's we've both been had very blessed careers in wrestling for sure.
Now we're winding down here, less 4 minutes into the interview. What is next for Ellsworth? Where can
Well,
we
like I said.
where can we look for Ellsworth? Where can we find the Ellsworth merchandise? Where's your next promotion? I know you got a show today. Go ahead and plug that. How could people get in contact with you to book you for an interview like this or any other events? How they do it?
Yeah, man. So I'm still keeping busy on the independents. I wrestled last night in Altoona, Pennsylvania for Big Time Wrestling. I'm wrestling tonight for Maryland Championship Wrestling and Hollywood, Maryland. And then tomorrow I'm wrestling in Pasadena, Maryland for Adrenaline Championship Wrestling, the show that I run, and Gilbert. And you can find me on Twitter at Real Ellsworth. You can find me on Instagram at James Ellsworth Wrestling. You can look for me on Cameo, cameo.com, search James Ellsworth. My videos are fun, and like I like doing the roasts on there. If you want to buy merchandise, just contact me on Instagram. Like I said, at James Ellsworth Wrestling. Just send me a DM. I will see it. And if you want to buy a T-shirt or an 8x10 or whatever, but yeah, I'm staying active, man. I feel like at some point, and it might not be tomorrow, it might not be 2 years from now, but at some point between now and the next 5 years, I'll pop up back on WWE and do some kind of surprise, crazy appearance. That's my next goal in mind. So we'll see what happens. Until then, I'm going to continue to grind it out. Scratch and claw and through the independents and have a good time with that and do my thing.
Never say never. They're a big fan of returns.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure they'll find a place for you. So sooner or later, you'll be back. But you're still present in the independent scene. Everybody that loves the independent scene, they're out there, and they know how to find you. And you have a little cult following, I'm sure. So
Yeah, everyone has their own little fans. I'm thankful every day for them, and wrestling fans in person.
right.
The internet's just dumb, but in person are so generous, so fun to talk to, and I love meeting them at conventions. Like I'm doing WrestleCade in a couple of weeks, and I just love meeting fans in person. They're very very kind, and nothing makes me happier than making someone's day when they just get to meet me. That's really cool, man.
Well, maybe we could have you lace up some virtual wrestling boots and make an appearance at 2K Wrestling Entertainment here one day
Heck yeah,
soon.
man. Let me know, brother. That'll be
All
fun.
all right, brother. Thank you very much. I am honored and blessed to meet you. We have to do this again, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, man. Take care. God bless. Stay safe. Remember, any man with two hands has a fighting chance.
Any man with two hands has a fighting chance. Mr. James Ellsworth, you have a good day and good luck at your show today. All right, guys, there it is. The first episode of The Shoot with Sam Schluter, the straight shooter. James Ellsworth was a great guest, and we have many more guests coming up. Oh, we got some bangers. We got fighters from the MMA world, just like Tanya Evinger. We have wrestlers from the independent world. We have Hall of Famers coming up. We're in the works. We're working hard for you. So don't go nowhere, and you're going to catch us here every Saturday on The Shoot with Sam Schluter and new guests every week. And we're going to have our own people here once in a while at Sam Schluter The Shoot, talking about how it is to wrestle in the 2KWE. Virtual or not, we get our wrestling on. All right, folks, that's it. That's the beep. That's the bell. Ding, 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 ding. Sam Schluter, the straight shooter, here with the first episode under wraps for The Shoot.